Okay, today is the day that I talk about my favorite movies of 2020. I saw a lot of good movies this year, but I also missed a lot. Movies like Nomadland, Minari, The Father, just to name a few. I was not able to see these movies, but if I did, they might have made this list because I've heard great things. Anyway, this is my own personal list of my favorite movies of the year, so it's going to be different than yours. That's the fun of movies. You could love one movie so much, it's your baby, there's nothing bad about it, and I could think it's the worst thing ever created. Isn't that fun? So, without further ado, let's get into it. Before I kick off the top 10, I would like to mention a few honorable mentions. These movies I very much liked, but didn't like them quite enough to make the top 10. Palm Springs. I thought it was a really fun movie with Andy Samberg, kind of a Groundhog's Day situation. Yeah, it is good. The Way Back. Probably Ben Affleck's best performance, at least that I've seen. Directed by Gavin O'Connor, director of Warrior, which I think was better than this movie, but I very much liked this movie. I've seen it twice now. Alcoholic, coaches basketball. Yeah, it's good. Run. This was my favorite horror movie of the year. Very, very entertaining. Very, very fun watch. I recommend it. Alright, now, number 10. Number 10. A Son. A Son is a movie that I haven't heard many people speak of this year. This movie is a 2.5-hour epic that follows a family that goes through many tragedies. And yeah, it's pretty tragic. It goes into what can happen when you don't consider the needs of others before your own. It's a film about how you need to have empathy, and how it's not always about what we say, but about what we don't say. In this family, there are two kids, one who is very good and smart, and the other who hangs out with the wrong crowds. Both are being raised by their hardworking parents. In this movie, each character burns like a sun, or puts themselves in a line of hardship and discomfort to keep the family floating. It's called A Sun because the sun burns itself to give warmth. There's some beautiful cinematography and great performances throughout. Definitely recommend watching this movie. Number 9. Let Them All Talk. Let Them All Talk is the latest film from director Steven Soderbergh. In this film, he really just does what the title says. He lets them all talk. The entire movie is just all the characters talking to each other on this cruise ship. I literally have not heard a single other person talk about this movie, so did this movie even come out this year? Yep, says 2020. I guess I'm the only person who thought this movie was good enough to talk about. Meryl Streep plays an author who is trying to write a new book and to right her wrongs with her friends. She brings her old friends and her nephew on this cruise, and there is this publishing agent who works for the company that's publishing the book, and they want her to write a sequel to her hit book that she had many years ago. Lucas Hedges is her nephew, and he's my favorite character. The publishing company lady doesn't want Meryl Streep to know that she's on the boat with her, so she only communicates with him, and they start hanging out a lot, and I really like where it goes. There's not really much to talk about in terms of plot, because there really isn't a plot besides what I just said. It's a lot of talking, but I thought the conversations were interesting. I feel like Steven Soderbergh just wanted to spend a few weeks on a boat and film some stuff. So he was like, yeah, I'm gonna make this movie, and then he got the budget for it. Apparently there wasn't even a script for this movie, or at least not a full script, and most of the film is just the actors improvising in character. I think that's super cool and definitely added to my experience watching the movie. So yeah, I really liked it, but who knows if anyone else will. Number 8. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. A touching, heartbreaking, and profound story about a 17-year-old girl struggling with an unintended pregnancy. The premise is simple, but the direction and the performances push it to new levels. There's not a lot that happens during the runtime, but the entire movie feels like it's constantly on the move. Sydney Flanagan plays Autumn, the teenage protagonist seeking medical help. I was shocked to hear that this was her acting debut because her performance is so subtle, it doesn't even seem like she's acting. It honestly feels like a documentary sometimes. Autumn's cousin is just as impressive and goes on this journey with her to help her. Her character is also challenged in the movie in a different way. Overall, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is sincere, heartfelt, and genuinely moving. Eliza Hittman's direction and writing are a standout. The subtle direction makes it, like I said earlier, documentary-like, so it's more of a performance-driven story with an amazing cast.
Number 7.
Sound of Metal. Sound of Metal is about a guy who is a drummer in this hardcore band, and he starts losing his hearing very fast. The doctor tells him to stay away from loud noises, but then he goes and plays another show that night. Come on, man. That was a hard watch. He eventually goes fully deaf and goes to this rehabilitation place, which is a big house with other deaf people who don't think of it as a disability, and they learn to live with what they have. This movie is very emotional. Riz Ahmed, he gives maybe my favorite performance of the year. Paul Rossi, who plays Joe, who is like the head of the house that he goes to, was incredible. His performance was so real and emotional. If you've seen the movie, you know what scene I'm talking about. It was mesmerizing. Literally every performance in this movie is amazing. They even have the girl from The Walking Dead in this movie. And if you're like, that girl was in The Walking Dead? Then I guess you haven't seen season 9 or whatever season she came in, and you're not missing much, but I just can't stop watching the show because I'm just too far into it. Some parts were hard to watch because we're seeing him struggle with not being able to hear anything. The sound design was
incredible.
If you don't know what that means, watch this movie and you'll understand. We hear what he hears, which is like really muffled sounds with some ringing sounds here and there. It was very interesting. The ending is fantastic. I thought it was going to go one way, but it went a completely different way, and I loved it. Very good movie. It's on Amazon Prime. Check it out.
Number 6.
Another Round. This movie was amazing. It tackles a super serious topic while being sad and hilarious at the same time. This is one of the most fun movies of the year. It's about these 4 high school teachers who are kind of boring, who want to do an experiment where they consume alcohol on a daily basis to see how it affects their social and professional lives. They claim that they are testing a Norwegian scientist's theory that the human body performs better while slightly intoxicated. I really like how they don't make it seem like alcohol is something terrible that no one should drink, but they also show that there are negative consequences. They really show how fun it can be to be drunk, but once you go too far, it's not so fun anymore. This film is hilarious, and Mads Mikkelsen was fantastic. The final scene of this movie is one of my favorite scenes of the year. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the movie, then too bad. I mean, come on, watch it. Oh, it has subtitles? Yeah, forget it.
Yeah, forget it. I'm not watching that movie.
Are you kidding me? You don't read movies? Grow up! All 4 main characters have a different struggle with alcohol, and it's very fascinating to watch, and it's very, very entertaining.
Number 5.
Mank. David Fincher's latest film was released on Netflix and is the story of the guy who wrote Citizen Kane. Herman Mankiewicz, or Mank, is played by Gary Oldman. I love Gary Oldman, so I thought he was amazing in this movie. On a technical standpoint, this movie is a masterpiece. The direction, the sound design, production design, cinematography, performances were all top-notch. The biggest complaint I see about this movie is that the story wasn't very interesting. I see where those people are coming from, but for me, I am so interested in old Hollywood and how movies were made back then that I was super invested into the story. But it's not just about him writing Citizen Kane. There are flashbacks throughout the movie that show different parts of his life, and it goes back and forth between the flashbacks and him writing the screenplay. It's very similar to Citizen Kane in that way, which was obviously intentional. This movie looks and sounds just like Citizen Kane. A lot of the story is focusing on his politics and how involved the movie studios were in politics back then. It was fascinating to me. Amanda Seyfried probably gave the best performance in the movie. It really felt like she was from the 40s. She had the look, the accent, everything was great. Also, Bill Nye the Science Guy is in this movie. That was weird. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Now, is this one of David Fincher's best movies? No, but it's up there for me. I really enjoyed it and plan on watching it again soon. If you like old movies, this is definitely one to check out. If you don't like old movies, then you will probably hate this movie. Next.
Number 4.
I'm Thinking of Ending Things. If you've seen this movie, you probably don't like it or you love it. I loved it. It was fantastic. The movie follows a young woman who is on her way to meet her boyfriend's parents for the first time. I don't want to get into the plot too much because because it would get into spoilers, but there are so many metaphors and clues that you catch on a second watch that make the movie so much better. Every line of dialogue feels deliberate and has a purpose. Jesse Plemons is in this movie, and he is slowly becoming one of my favorite actors. The first time I ever saw him was in Breaking Bad, and since then, every single thing he's been in, he's been the best part of it. He is such a good actor. Toni Collette and David Thewlis play his parents, and they play their characters at different ages throughout the movie, and it's hard to talk about this movie without spoiling it, but a lot of people will watch this movie and not understand it. I understood it on the first watch, but watching it a second time, I picked up even more. It's one of those movies that can mean one thing to one person and something else to another person. Does that make sense? I think so. Hey, let's move on to the next movie.
Number 3.
Tenet. I think I am the world's biggest Tenet fan. Some people think it's a convoluted mess. Some people have no idea what they watched. I personally think that this movie was tailor-made for me. It's everything I love put into one movie. It's an espionage movie with some of the best action I've ever seen, with time travel. I've already made a video on why I love this movie, so I won't talk about it for long, but I think this movie is completely brilliant. Everything seems so thought out. The movie starts in one place, and then halfway through it turns around and ends up in the same place. Just like the title. Just like the machines they use. It's so dope. The performances are incredible. The score is probably my favorite of the year. That music is so epic, I don't even mind that it covers up the dialogue in most scenes. But this is exactly my kind of movie. This was my favorite movie of the year ever since I saw it. But recently, I watched 2 other movies that just slightly beat it out.
Number 2.
Promising Young Woman. Now, this movie isn't really that deep or meaningful to me. I just think it's awesome. Carey Mulligan plays Cassie, a girl who acts super drunk at bars every weekend until some guy comes up to her and tries to take advantage of her so she can teach them a lesson. Going into it, I thought it was going to be some basic revenge story and it would be super predictable. Some parts were predictable, but I genuinely was not expecting what happens at the end. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet because it's amazing. So that's all I'm gonna say. Carey Mulligan is sometimes super sweet and nice, and then other times she's like, I don't give a what you say, I'm gonna do what I want. It was crazy to see those 2 different sides of the characters just switching in and out. Bo Burnham is fantastic in this too. He's hilarious, and I can't wait for him to direct another movie because 8th Grade was one of my favorite movies I've seen in the last decade. The soundtrack is perfect. The direction is really good. Directed by Emerald Fennell, and I guess this is her first feature-length film. Well, good job. This is amazing. Everything was incredible. I loved it. Go see this movie
Right now. Number 1.
Soul. This is the first Pixar movie that was made with some
Soul.
Pixar, you did it again! I was not expecting to love this movie as much as I did. I was expecting it to be similar to Onward in terms of goodness. I thought Onward was good, but not one of Pixar's best. But Soul is slowly moving up my Pixar list. I am a huge Pixar fan. I love Ratatouille, the Toy Story movies, Monsters Inc. I love most Pixar movies. This is one of my favorite Pixar movies in the last 10 years. Yeah. Seriously, this movie is brilliant. It's so creative. It's similar to Inside Out, but I think it's better. This movie reminds me of Ratatouille in a way because, like Ratatouille, this movie doesn't feel like it's made for kids. This movie's made for mature grown-ups, but it can also be entertaining and informative for kids. Now, do I think this movie is as good as Ratatouille? No. Of course not. But it's close. I thought the message of this film was going to be one thing, but then it ended up being something completely different and so much better. I was having a good time with the movie, but I didn't love it until the last 30 minutes when I realized what the movie was doing. This movie is about the difference between a passion and an obsession, and when your passion becomes an obsession, and how that can be a bad thing. It is also about how your purpose in life doesn't need to be a specific thing. Your purpose in life is to live life and enjoy every moment.
It's absolutely beautiful.
And I am now convinced that Pete Docter can do no wrong. He has one of the best filmographies I've ever seen, given how every single thing he's done is at least great. And if not, it's a masterpiece. So yeah, this movie is my favorite movie of the year, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm excited to see new movies in 2021, and I'll see you next year.